We have AI credit for this. I'm using unsplashed open source images, crediting the authors. And I want to thank ACG, AABC, and EMA for allowing me to talk about ESG, how it applies to our work as tab technicians and test and balance engineers, as well as commissioning providers, energy managers, or any environment where ESG subsides. And this is a presentation to start talking about incorporating these ideas and these thoughts into your business, and predominantly about a plan for your business to support ESG concepts. Basically, I want to talk about the concepts and what they are, some of the methods used, some of the metrics. I want you to understand the current sectors where it's really being applied right now, and discover the potential for services within your energy management or commissioning companies to engage the ESG market and financial organizations that are involved in it. And then also talk about an ESG plan and the level of your own company and moving upward through the different organizations you participate with. This is a conversation I'd like to have. Basically, I want to start with a concept of Kaizen that was brought to the United States through Toyota Motor Manufacturing back in, I guess, the 80s. And it was sort of a precursor to this concept we talk about today. I've got some language that'll be read, and if you consider these ideas and the thoughts that were being put out in the last century and compare them to the ESG concepts that we look at today, you'll find out this is really not a new scenario, that this sort of thinking, non-financial metrics for assessing capital investments and capital allocations has been around for a long time. I'm going to go through 4 or 5 or 6 different types of public scenarios that we see now that beg for ESG platforms, ESG framework in order to resolve them. We're going to not do the skit because we had problems with it, but Bob and Peter will come up and we'll talk a little bit about that real quick. And then I'm going to define ESG in my terms, and I'll talk about some of the metrics that were going on, and then we'll have a conversation about stakeholders, clients, and what benchmarks are and how disclosure goes. So Kaizen comes out of the Toyota production system. It was produced in a book, or published in a book in 2012. Fujio Cho, who is a master teacher and also the chairman of Toyota Motor Corporation to this day. It was written in honor of him, and it was produced in a very sustainable means using a local printing press, a block set printing, not mass produced. And it's a real tribute to basically the Zen principles and the harmony with nature of the whole concept that this publication has. Some of the things in there are that it really talks about the history of Toyota production system, and then it talks about Goroku, which is really sayings that the leaders of the Toyota Manufacturing Corporation use on the production floor to spread the word to their managers and their employees, and then the managers spread it to their employees, and then workers spread it to workers, and so forth. Do not waste workers' time. Standard work is static. Standardized work changes through continuous improvement. It is important to learn the fundamentals, and the number one condition for a company to continue to exist is profitability. These are some of the fundamentals. Jidoka is automation with human intelligence. In fact, in the last century with the automation in the automotive industry, Choson really had a lot of concern about machines not being properly guided by human beings and human intelligence. Takt is a German word, and it's really a discussion of the optimum production capability of your organization. You look at your total available working hours, and you divide it by your product hours that you produce, and you come up with an optimum. And Monozukuri was really a manufacturing with craftsmanship, pride, zeal, history, spirit, joy, and move, trying to bring manufacturing into the realm of a human endeavor and not just a strictly mechanized operation. And Muda is the enemy. Muda is the waste of human resources, and there is nothing worse than Muda. So we can hear some of the Choson words as they were written.
Jim, Kaizen starts with program, the code starts with how to remember to be grateful to the local community where you do business. He gave us special help and favors, creating new roads, creating tax breaks, and operating as a rural. We need to realize how fortunate we are to be able to conduct business in foreign countries. We should return the favor by being good corporate citizens to the countries and their people. one for business. TPS, which is the third production system you saw in the previous slide, is a unique system for rationalization of manufacturing processes. Four ends of manufacturing being man, machine, material, and methods.
And then Ono-san was Chosan's one of the only two chairmen of Toyota that wasn't actually a Toyota himself in the family. And Ono-san says that most of us look for reasons when we fail, but only few of us look for reasons when we succeed. It's important to search for the reason why you are able to succeed in a task and make sure to use the acquired learning in the future. And then there's Kozo Saito, who was teaching the TPS system at the University of Kentucky and continues to this day. And here are some words from Kozo.
The basic principle applied to almost any activity in our life, but it requires humility, service-oriented lifestyle, respect for others, and a quest to seek the ultimate solutions in our life. If we are comfortable in the current situation, there is no need for Kaizen. Kaizen only becomes possible under a healthy degree of urgency to continuously seek a better way of doing things.
Which means we need Kaizen all the time. These are Muda principles. People are not motivated when they're not involved, they don't participate in decision making, they're not given relevant information, not given responsibility, not given authority, and their contributions are not recognized. And Muda principles are that people should not be forced to do what they don't want to do. Work that does not add value should be eliminated because it wastes workers' efforts. And people should use machines and not the other way around. To correct problems, team members must make decisions. Fujio Cho saw that there was a deeper human problem. This is in the last century, and it's a very foresighting vision that the man had. He saw this human problem with mass production, the technology-driven shift in the position of the worker from being controller of manufacturing to being controlled by machines. And Chosan bemoaned the loss of pride from craft production. And here's some more words from Chosan.
There's an enormous amount of waste generated in each industry, including the waste of human resources. The waste of energy, like electricity, natural gas, water, and waste material defects will lead to the waste of natural resources, which will eventually lead to the destruction of the environment. In other words, the problem of waste is something that not only the industry is struggling with, but also nations and the world.
And go ahead, Chosan, some more.
So the action comes first.
The action comes first, then learning. Action should come first, and the correct learning process will follow. If we do not have the experience or action-based knowledge, we'd better not make quick judgment on the issues and the problems, even though those things might seem obvious to us.
Learn one, teach one, do one, right?
Right.
Go ahead, Chosan.
Do Kaizen in your thinking by gaining new experience and interacting with students through various activities, not just classroom kind. For example, Zoom, yes.
Which now is Zoom, right? Let's get out of those Zoom meetings and get involved with each other. And Kozo, let's have a quote from Kozo.
It is understood in TPS why workers are busy transforming materials into useful products. They are also in the process of self-transformation at the same time.
And one of the hallmarks of Kaizen is the respect for the worker and the understanding of the value of the worker as a resource, as the most vital resource. Looking at issues now, if we look at our recent NFPA magazine, it's got a really good layout about the homeless problem and the correlation between increased homelessness and fires in vacant buildings. And you say, well, what does this have to do with ESG? I say it has to do with the E, the S, and the G, right? Because we're burning buildings and polluting with that, right? We have a social problem, whether it's mental health or drug addiction or what those are, and we have a government problem. And these are ESG issues. This NFPA, I don't know what you call it, and it's this month's NFPA has a good article in it about LEED buildings also have a higher propensity to burn. I think that would be interesting to look at. So here you have a trade-off between sustainability and the ability to do reliability. And then I also want to point out the book American Sirens, and it's a fantastic novel. It's written like a story. The author of this book wrote an entire historical accounting of the history of the emergency medical services and never heard about these guys in Pittsburgh at Freedom House, who were really among the innovators in emergency medical procedures, things like intubation in the field, CPR, the inventors of CPR were here. And it's an incredible book if you want to see people who face adversity, overcome adversity, to actually set standards in this country. It's not just a story, about, black people succeeding. It's a story about the whole world and the whole community succeeding because of these black men in Freedom House in Pittsburgh. Another thing I want to point out to you is we know about the Living Building Challenge, and this is one of the most demanding sustainability metrics that we have out there right now. And, I read about 2018, there was a project in Massachusetts called the Kellogg House. And that was a 225-year-old renovation. It's been renovated multiple times and so forth. And they used extraordinary resources to develop it into a green, sustainable building. And the quote out of that came from extraordinary commitment to once again repurpose a beloved and historical building. So, what is the cost in terms of an ESG score or the value to create a sustainable facility out of a 225-year-old building? How does that look in an ESG score? What is the value of a building versus maybe the value of other things that are going on in that community? So things like preserving historical building have ESG factors in them. The Transmission and Distribution magazine in recent months talked about attacks on the electrical grid. What kind of a person shoots an electric substation? Some of these are sinister, some of these are planned out, some of these could be possible elements of war, but the bottom line is, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation has to come up with physical security standards to protect transformers and substations and so forth. And again, we get into equity, we get into environmental, who's going to have the resources to protect their grid? What's the danger to our environment when the grids are attacked? Who has the resources to put fencing and make bulletproof infrastructure? These are questions that require evaluation, and they need metrics to answer. And the whole physical stuff pales in comparison to the whole cybersecurity side. These are ESG questions of our day. When you're given a binary choice, the chances are somebody isn't being on the level with you. And I think that's what we experience in the green discussions that we have today. You're either a green or you're a dinosaur, right? You're either for all the new energy or you're just an old fossil fuel jerk, all right? But I'm going to say, looking at Vaclav Smil's recent book, and there's another good book out there too by Alex Epstein called Fossil Future. And you basically look at the four pillars of modern society. We're talking about cement, steel, plastic, and ammonia. And your electrical and your energy base is what it takes to produce those products, to feed your people, to house your people, and to move your people. And I'm telling you that you cannot smelt steel with solar panels, okay, just as a good example. So it argues for fuel density, thermodynamic values, and I talk about circular economy and carbon accounting here in a minute. You'll see more application to it. But the quote from Howard Odum is telling. It's that industrial man no longer eats potatoes made from the sun. He eats potatoes partly made of oil. And that's true because you're using a massive amount of energy to produce the ammonia, to produce the fertilizer, and then you're running high engines and gasoline, and you're transporting it, and you're drinking oil every time you eat a bite of corn. 60% of the nutrients produced in China are derived from synthetic ammonia. That's 10% more than the natural global average from the most populated country in the world. So you can argue, that the Haber-Bosch process was the most important technical advance in the history of humanity. And another one, just to give you an idea of where we're at with materials and resources and the cost of energy to produce and to move and to waste. In 1 year, China produced as much concrete as the United States did in the century of the 20th century. And the quote is from Elon Musk in a recent interview, and it was astonishing to me that the man would talk in context of AI and say, well, let's talk about something difficult to do, which is make cars. In other words, in Elon Musk's opinion, AI is very easy in comparison to making cars. And the whole idea of me bringing up AI right now is the idea of how we have accelerators and disruptors, and AI is that. And if you combine ESG metrics with AI, you end up with predetermined outcomes because you can program the results you want. And that can happen really fast, and it can be embedded in your systems and very difficult to remove. And I think one of the things we've seen nationally or on news lately is the fear that a lot of people have about unleashing AI and where does it stop and how do you bring it back under the control. It brings you into the conversation of digital God, and are you a speciesist if you want to, restrict the amount of artificial intelligence? That's a term that comes out of the, animal rights movement, and now being applied by zealots who really want at all costs to move forward. And ChatGPT is really a game changer, right? How long before, or are any of you writing your test scripts with ChatGPT? How about the tests? How far away are we from artificial intelligence writing our scripts? I don't want to talk about true or false with this. I just want to read it. At a Marriott hotel in Atlanta, the soap dispensers have a little bit of a race problem. An African-American guest at the Dragon Con Sci-Fi and Fantasy Convention visited a bathroom in the event's host hotel and discovered the soap dispenser from a British company called Technical Concepts wouldn't sense his hands. When his friend, a white man named Larry, tried after him, out came the soap. And this is from a source that helps young people to process news and information. My point is just this. 4 companies are named in this. If they knew the name of your company, they would name it too. And then you would be the guy who commissioned this. And you would be dealing with this as an issue regardless of it. This is one of the things that you want to have an ESG plan for. Come on up, you guys. Let's talk about what we did here. This is my blank slide approach right now. What we did was we had a skit that kind of perfectly epitomized, the kind of downfalls of just unloosing ESG on your corporation over on this side, guys. And so we were going to come up and, and Peter was going to be one character, and we had this thing pretty well cast. But Peter, why don't you grab the mic and just tell the group what happened and what resulted. We had run it by. I decided to vet the presentation to our shareholders and then to all the people who are going to participate. And I had gotten the feedback from one of my associates without much detail. And then you called me on Sunday night.
And after I spoke with my son, explained to him what we were going to be doing, referenced the cartoon, he put me correct, put it that way. As an honorary inductee into the Political Corrective Hall of Fame, Hall of Shame, I appreciated that being told that what we were going to be doing it may not be received appropriately.
Right.
So,
and then basically what happened was the content that we were using was good content, but the author had gone in public and made statements that would make bringing him up toxic to certain percentages of the audience, and you just can't deal with that.
and it would be taken away from what Jim is trying to get across.
It defeats my whole purpose, and it really did. And then Bob, maybe you can talk about what we did at SERPA years back and kind of how we evolved.
So that's the other thing I want to talk briefly about is you see all these presentations up here and you see a lot of graphics and pictures, and some years back, and Jim's aware of it, it's an organization that both Jim and myself were in, and we had done a presentation, and actually there was a graphic in it, a picture in it that we'd had in it for years. Okay, this was a picture that we'd used it was a very benign picture. It was a picture of a group of people around a table, for example, doing a meeting or a conference. And after the presentation, which was really, there was no revenue or fee involved. It was actually given to a group within our organization, so it was really more of a informational type thing. We all of a sudden got served with a notice from a lawyer saying that you've used a copyrighted picture in your presentation and you're being sued by the owner of that copyright. And so to make the long story short, what happened, we found out after the fact, and there are, whether you know it or not, there's companies out there that troll the internet, and they look for pictures that they suspect people would use in presentations. And if they find that it's not copyrighted, they will copyright it, and then they will instantly start doing a search on the internet to see who's using it. And if they find that it's being used in any way, shape, or form, they'll sue you, okay? We were using this picture way before they ever found it and ever copyrighted it. That didn't make any difference. They filed suit. The bottom line is we had to get a lawyer, went back and forth, I think they initially sued us for like $25,000. We ended up settling for about $2,500, as I recall, Jim. But it just shows you what's going on out there in terms of the world. And so now we've adopted a policy that if we create any presentations, it's not only an organizational, it's also within our company, et cetera, that anytime we do something, we have our marketing group, our business group, our organization, they go through, they screen it, we make sure that we're not using any copyrighted images. We also make sure that the language that we use, you know, Jim's talking a little bit about that it's not offensive in any way, shape, or form. And you can't believe how difficult that is, because people, no matter what you say, people will perceive it in a different way, different light.
Sounds good, Bob. Thanks a lot. And really the idea there is an ESG plan that involves discourse with the public and what your vetting policies are and how to do it. And it's not a matter of copyright content anymore. It's a matter of the sources that you're using and how that works. And I won't go too much further into that, but you know, it could have been a bad situation if we'd have done this skit, even though it was kind of cool. I really want to start about what is ESG, and I try to roll through this pretty fast. This is like a mile-a-minute deal. It goes back really to the 80s and the Sustainability Development Goals set by the UN, and the word ESG really was coined back in 2015, and you should get this document and you should read it, because the train has left the station. The people who signed this document are more powerful than the countries that they reside in. And they got together and they have put this vehicle in motion. It's less than 20 years of ESG as a concept. There's now about $30 trillion in asset allocation on ESG investment. And here's the thing, and you say, well, why does it matter? When a group like the fiduciary duty is described by UN, UNEP is the United Nations Environmental Program, and their financial arm, along with PRI, and PRI is the Principles of Financial Investment, which is the largest global network of ESG financial investors in the world. And they made this statement that failing to consider all long-term investment values drivers include ESG issues as a failure of judiciary responsibility. So if you're failing fiduciary, you're failing in legal matters, you know, you as a banker are forced into certain things in the global market, and this is the environment that is currently doing it. And now put that on top of the banking system and the fact that you're being told we really don't need all these little regional banks, do we? We need to go to all large banks, and we need to put credit scores on people, basically. My definition, ESG is environmental, social, governance, risk management framework that builds trust in markets through identification and management of sustainable related risks and opportunities. And my message to this audience today is that ESG requires serious, honest brokers and transparency and accountability, because right now, the people doing the energy audits and doing the work are basically financial advisors and financial analysis. So we're getting our butts kicked, basically, by groups like the Chartered Financial Analysts Institute and people like that are taking energy data and correlating it into financial values and distributing it as a way of achieving ESG scores on big financial deals. And when I talk about the financial side, I know there's not a lot of equity investment right now, but when you talk about assets under management, AUM, you know, assets are what we deal in. We deal in buildings, you know, we deal in real estate, we deal in healthcare. The biggest client that's involved in ESG right now is not the financial institutions, it's the healthcare. The biggest investments. We're in a point in history now where there's a transfer of wealth occurring from the baby boomer at the high levels of the world financials, the people who really have money. They're transferring their wealth from baby boomers to millennials, and millennials have a different value system, and the millennials are driving the financial markets, and that's what we're at now. And we're all real comfortable, I think, with the E side and the environment and what that entails, because a lot of people think ESG, they automatically think of global warming and green and so forth. The social side is very heavily invested in DEBI, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, which is you want to be there in addition to all the things being set right. And then the governance side is policy. It begins at the corporate level, or really the personal level, and moves all the way up to the United Nations. But it's these commissioning specialists that really I think is something that EMA and us as an industry really need to look at in general. Their analytical skills, they come out of markets that are just financial, and they are really directly and indirectly managing the net zero emissions and the carbon neutrality calculations that are going on in the industry right now. Basically, your impacts as far as that's concerned is that the metrics and the values that evaluate company performance are in financial institutions' hands. Where is the role of the energy manager in all of this is my big question to everybody. There's a lot of points here. Integration and development of an ESG plan is probably one of the most valuable things that you can take away from this. And the idea that if you write your own ESG plan, you get to create the metrics that you want to apply to it. And you get to create and document your value system for your company. If you don't, when there's a conflict, it will be defined for you. This is an idea of carbon accounting. You could also look at it as greenhouse gas accounting, depending on what. I'm trying to keep these models simple, and I know I don't have all the elements in them, but it's the concept I'm trying to prove. And in the carbon accounting, the way it's practiced by the CFA Institute and others, you have the different scope levels, and your direct implications are your company vehicles and your machines and the things you do that you're directly responsible for, you pay utilities on, and so forth. You're going to be accounted for all that in the carbon accounting scheme. Then you get a little more nebulous when you reach the indirect. These are the people you deal with. I know you're paying a utility bill, but is that the total cost of the energy that you receive in your house? Same thing with the infrastructure. Right now, one of the biggest inequities in infrastructure is the building of solar or the building of charging stations for electric vehicles, which disproportionately favors people who can afford to buy electric vehicles, and yet it's coming out of the entire, but that's not being counted on indirect either. And then when you look at the third-party side, these people are getting 100% discount on third-tier, and it's minor things like 400 tons of mined products, 400 tons of mining going into every electric vehicle battery, the displacement of communities for cobalt, nickel mining, these costs are not accounted for. So you, as you're sitting there as an individual or a small business, you're reporting, you're paying for your upstream, you're paying for your downstream, but what's happening on those scope 2 and 3 levels? That's very, very important to consider. This idea is a life cycle accounting, and the idea is to put back as many things into reuse as you possibly can. And you can see the major inputs from extraction all the way to the end use or the end life, and that there's inputs and waste all along. But the idea is to capture a recycle stream and put it back into the process and manufacturing, thereby eliminating extraction, which is the most polluting of the steps, and then remanufacturing. In reality, what we do is the little arrow you see there at a diagonal between use and end. We get to the life cycle end of a product, we may repurpose it, we may recycle it, get it right back to the user state. But the recycle stream is, a recycled drip, right? Who puts gates and rails and where do they put them to make that system work? Here's more on the circular economy, and I'd like to talk about a digital circular economy with AI, because everything is going to be automated, everything happens fast right now. Financial institutions, groups like the CFA that I've brought up in the past, they have training courses where they teach people how to use automated tools for investing. In other words, self-learning investment tools. So the people we're talking about doing these accounting exercises are already using artificial intelligence in their models. Okay, the problem, of course, is all these things that are going to be corrected about it, but the top of the list, the system leakage, is the greatest component of the circular system. So, you have the peers, that they want to accomplish, which is basically no more waste, no more pollution, reuse, recycle, and then regenerate nature. But you can't do that when 95% of your system is leakage. As another example, what that looks like, this would be on the commodity side, where you see at the bottom of the triangle that all these different components are working with each other, and then these different systems have to interact. And again, you have system leakage as your largest component. But whether it's consumption moving to system, moving to recycling, or production moving to consumption, it's an interesting metric when we look at these. This is another way of seeing the circular economy, and the problem that you really have here is that resource management is 100% top-down in this model. In other words, there's people at the top who control the resources, and they're being driven by data that's being processed from AI through technical data. This is a human operation being replaced by automation. So it's important to understand that it's an economic system that's based on elimination of waste, but at the same time, it's an economic system based on the elimination of human thought. When you look at the model back and forth, if you look at where we're at in terms of the first arrow on the far left, where you go from data transformation to resources, that's an unburdening of human decision-making, okay? And then if you look at the second arrow, which takes you from automated data processing over to the transformation side of the data, that is an increase in systematic resource and production and allocation efficiencies, but how do they do it? They do it via automation. So you have a top-down resource allocation, and then you have an automated decision-making process, which is really affected by the people at the top anyways. So there is no bottom-up in this system, and the idea is decrease human labor. So greenwashing is lying. It's really about as simple as that. It's unsubstantiated exaggeration. You got to watch it in your market. Your ESG plan has to have awareness, and it has to have metrics. The bottom line is the amount of sustainable marketing that you advertise has to be matched by the amount of sustainable practice. I mean, it's as simple as not lining. Align your investments with your ESG goals. Don't have a bunch of ESG goals out there and then don't respond in any way. And investing is not enough in the environment that they're in. We're looking for action as well based on the ESG modeling. So these are things to keep in mind. This is my silo shot, and basically everybody wants to make silos, one for the E, one for the S, one for the G, and that makes sense coming from the CFA and the accounting background. Everybody wants to be able to neatly put it on a debit and loss spreadsheet, right? But the truth is most factors have ES and G elements in them all. And again, I say that you just reject the green versus fossil binary options, and we start looking for the right mixed fuel sources and the right revenue generating, socially equitable, governmentally correct, properly environmentally protective policies for our own companies and do it on that basis. Governance means audits. It means internal controls. It means restriction on shareholder revenue distributions and bonuses and things like that, and definitely full disclosure. And philanthropy in action, like I just mentioned. And investing is in relationships close and afar, and that's really what this comes down to. You need relationships with your clients, relationships with your banker. You need accounting and you need auditing skills to help you with these ESG imperatives. And then this slide is back into really talking about the whole global picture. What we're really talking about when we're talking about the UN and the Global Compact is we're talking about human rights, labor standards, anti-corruption, and environment. And if you read the Global Compact, I think read the introduction and then go to the very back end of it and read what they call Exhibit 24, which is really the implementation. And then you can see from reading the implementation that in less than 10 years, it's very far down the road. It's ours as a challenge to incorporate in our business models. DEIB is its own subject. I could really spend a lot more time, and I don't mean to discount it, but I mean that it's important to your business operation, both at home and in the field. And this is part of an essential ESG plan where you have an accountability, a purpose, a conscience, you have leadership on the subject. And what does it look like? I mean, what are the metrics and tools? For diversity, you're wanting to look at demographics, you're looking at your risk management, what are your hiring and your promoting procedures, how do you train your people, things like that. In terms of equity, it's similar. It's about compensation, about retirement benefits. Does performance translate into advancement? These types of metrics need to be put in place through ESG. And then also we have for inclusion things like retention, how much turnover do you have in your organization? If different types of people come into your company, are they able to sustain their work there and perform well? So this is just a brief mention. And most are used to the DEI concept, but I put another bullet down there under belonging. And I think for Goodwill to think of belonging as wellness and the WELL program and the things that we've seen from GBCI that really support that concept as well. And that's largely where we're getting this concept from. I'm not going to go through this in great detail. Basically, it's a graphic that discusses what's the importance in your company. Are you performing goals based on shareholder objectives, or are you performing goals based on multi-stakeholder objectives? And I don't know that one is, superior to the other, but I think as far as your ESG plan goes, you need to understand where you are and have that understood by everybody that's in your organization. And then clients, and we talk about client interests. Government mandates are going to affect your clients, and your work is going to be dependent on that. ESG is in government mandates. We should anticipate and prepare ourselves for an increased regulatory environment, and that is not just involving ESG, but financial in all aspects. Your business framework, your institutional framework, how they get financing, and legal framework. A lot of times we get involved in big projects that have multi-group partnerships involved in them and things like that, and that's where your clients are really interested. What are your actions? I mean, you can write an ESG plan, you can have action plans in that ESG plan for the different scenarios. Measure and verify is kind of like what we do in building commissioning and in energy management, where we use metrics to evaluate performance, and I think that's in there. You can kind of see how the supply chain gets cultivated through ESG. And this is an example of a social metric, right? This is not a non-financial metric to evaluate your performance. And this one doesn't actually have numbers on it, but you could see where you could do performance scores and you could rate your level of motivation. You can't really talk about DEI without bringing up Maslow, because these Maslow charts and how they work are a big part of the metrics that get developed for social values. But you can see, as a person comes in an organization and he's just scrambling and clawing along, as the right types of motivation occur, they advance up into the productivity until they're, highly engaged. And these are metrics that you use, and you use them across demographics, and you try to figure out, are we in a good place in terms of what we're providing for our personnel. And then integrity, transparency, reliance, compliance, fairness, empathy, independence, wellness, security. These are the values that you want in your financial or in your ESG plan. And it's financial, it's a risk management position, it's a procurement prerogative because we procure work that's played in this area. Human resources will be improved through your ESG policies, I think. And of course, you want to contribute beneficially to the environment. So Mark, I raced faster than I thought I would. So that means you get to fill the time. I am. I think what's remarkable is TLC, and you can go on their website. They have it posted on the front of their website. TLC has produced a ESG plan. And Mark, I'm going to just sit down and let you talk about that a little.
All right.
And then I probably have some questions for you.
Very good. All right. So just for context, I'm Mark Alpha with TLC Engineering Solutions. We are a MEP, energy services and commissioning firm, primarily in the Southeast. We've got 19 offices across the country. And what Jim asked me to talk about was our ESG plan. And that story starts in 2016 with JUST certification. Is anybody familiar with JUST certification? One guy, great. So if you're familiar with, and Jim mentioned it, the Living Building Challenge and the International Living Futures Institute, it's kind of you could call it an ESG scorecard, but it's mostly focused on the social aspects. And it's really about transparency and social equity, fairness, diversity, pay scale equity, those types of things. And if you're doing a Living Building Challenge project, you actually get, I think you're actually required to have a firm that is JUST certified. So we went through that process in 2016, and I've worked for TLC for quite a long time, and I considered us to be a very open, transparent fair firm. And if you'd asked me, I would have said, well, of course we pay everybody the same, right? It's, we don't discriminate or anything. It's not, like, at least not on purpose. But when you drill down and really start looking at all of the, the different, different groups, we did find some gaps. And, it's a what gets measured gets done kind of thing. So we didn't know we had some holes until we started looking at it. And the more that we dug into it, we adjusted people, some paid, make sure everybody's earning a living wage compared to other firms and things like that. But since then, since 2016, we've recertified our Just certification every 2 years, in 2016, 18, 20, and I think we just did it in 2022. And our scores keep going up because, again, what we focus on gets done. What we get measured gets done. And if you're interested, there's a QR code there. You can go to our website and see not only our Just label, we were very proud about that, but then also our ESG plan. And so we went from that Just certification to our ESG plan and developing a plan. And what I'm going to talk about, as Jim said, you want to define these. If you decide you want to create an ESG plan, you want to define what's important to you. You don't want anybody else to, there's no right or wrong to it. What we defined is what we decided as a company was important to us and what we wanted to measure and what we wanted to document and share and track. And that was going to be different for different firms, different companies, different industries, but this is ours. So just telling you about our process. And we had a group of people, it was a very diverse group, but it included engineers and commissioning people and marketing and corporate. We have great corporate leadership that supported this, and we came up with these basically 12 items, which I can't really read there, but I've got it here, which I'm just going to hit real quickly. So this is also a really easy way to share this information. It's not, we got 12 items, we made a little Brady Bunch type grid there, and so we track these things on an annual basis. So it includes things like the first one is, achieving net zero carbon on our operations. Again, things that are important to us. 2, striving to get to net zero waste by 2040. That's a fun one, let me tell you. 3, minimizing the ongoing climate risk to our operations. This gets into, what climate-wise could affect how we do business. We're headquartered in Florida. Climate challenges are kind of in our DNA, hurricanes, flooding, that type of thing, and it really impacts our ability to operate as a company if we have a hurricane come through and knock out our headquarters. 4, we want to lead the AEC industry in net carbon neutral goals. Number 5 has to do with the healthfulness of our buildings, and we're, provide certification of healthy buildings, in all of our office workplace environments. Our headquarters is well certified gold, and we have got several other offices that are striving for well certification. 6, we wanted to increase our company paid volunteer hours from 4 hours to 8 hours per year. That seems a little granular to me, but we want people to be involved in their community and contribute. And we will actually, pay you to take a day and go, build a house, work for, the Second Harvest Food Bank, whatever is important to you and helps your community. We'll give you at least a day of paid time to do that. 7, identify stakeholders within our local communities we work with and create community engagement plans. 8, our leadership should ideally reflect the diversity of our people, of our communities in which we work. That one's a little harder being an engineering firm, which I'll talk about here in a second. The 9th one is about paid family leave. We wanted to increase. We already had a good policy for maternal leave, but we also added 12 weeks of paid parental leave, so the dad can, take some time off to be with the family as well. 10, update our compensation policy to make sure that we are providing a living wage for everyone, including part-time and temporary employees. 11, create a framework to produce procurement goals. So we want to make sure that if we're talking about carbon emissions, the level 2, level 3 carbon is accounted for and tracked. And 12, which seems kind of obvious, but it's to update our ESG plan every year. We don't want it to be just something that we developed and sits on a shelf and then, oh yeah, you can look at our website. We are very proud of it. We put it on our website, but we are constantly monitoring and adjusting these goals at least every year. Our board of directors is completely on board. I'm on our board, and we've got a lot of support for this, including how we track these things. And this is an example of our tracking sheet that we go over every year. I'm not going to go that in too much detail, but it basically lists each of those goals and a quick green, red, yellow, blue. Are we achieving some of those goals? Some are easy. We just adopt a policy and included 12 weeks of paid family leave. Some of them are a little hard, like measuring and getting to net zero waste by 2040. That's a harder one. So we're making slower progress on it. But the important thing is that what I want you to take away is that we decided that this was an important thing. We decided what was important to us, and we created a pretty straightforward and simple plan that measures and tracks those things. And again, if you're really interested, you can click the QR code and go see what it is on our website.
Mark, I'm going to grab that other microphone. You stay up here. I got a question
Okay.
for you while I'm walking down, though. What about, is it a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan? And go ahead and answer that.
So that's a great question.
And then an annual budget.
Oh, okay. The first part is it's a really good question about how long are some of these goals. And at first, the first version didn't have as many quantifiable targets as you might have, as we wanted. So part of it, most of these things have a time frame within them. And the ones that were easy to do, we kind of did those and checked them off. But we're also talking about does that mean we then replace those immediately with other goals? Okay, we got the family leave, do we need to add another goal, or should we just enjoy that check mark, that green check mark for a while? But other ones that are harder, we're clear to set goals, zero waste by 2040, and I forget what some of the other dates are, but we try to put a timeline for each individual one. It's not okay, we did everything on the plan, that's it, we're done with our ESG plan. It's a continuing, growing, evolving thing that we've had for really only a couple of years now. I think this is the second time we've updated it. It was just recently.
Without values, though, how do you determine your annual budget? How does that work?
Oh yeah, we don't have a budget for for any of this. At least we don't have a line item that says ESG plan. Now we do evaluate paid family leave, for instance. What is the cost to the firm potentially for that, and look at that, can we afford that, and does it matter if we can afford it or not, or is it just the right thing to do, and try to balance that versus recruitment and retention, and these are things that are important to the new workforce. So it's we don't have a line item that says, oh, we're gonna we got $100,000 to do ESG this year. It just doesn't work that way.
So then in terms of your TLC mission versus your ESG goals, how does that work? Is it a problem trying to distinguish between the two? Are they the same, that kind of thing?
So if you look at our plan, at the ESG plan on our website, the first couple of pages include our mission and our vision, which I'm not going to bore you with here, but everything fits within, again, our plan is our plan. What's important to us, it has to flow from your company values, right? From our mission, from our vision, from our company culture. And one kind of leads to the other, and then it can be a little bit circular because if we focus on these things and say it's important to us, that kind of helps define our culture, which then helps us meet those goals.
That leads into really my third question, which is TLC's value system, right? And what was going on before you did your ESG plan that led you into doing an ESG plan, right? There has to be a certain culture to begin with.
Right, and yeah, so we'd like to think we're a pretty, certainly for an engineering firm, a pretty progressive firm, but like I said, we started with our JUST certification, and there was a business reason for that because it might help us on our Living Building Challenge projects, but it also felt like the right thing to do. Transparency and social equity and making sure people are making fair living wages, those are good things, right? But also, let me ask you this, what's the biggest challenge that you face in delivering whatever services you provide, commissioning or engineering or energy projects. Which is also, how about staffing? Right? Hiring people, hiring, retention, and whatever you want to say, you know, the new workforce, this is important things to them. I think it should be important to everybody, but we have a lot of people when we're going through the inter process, especially, you know, younger generations that say, I went on your website and I saw your Just certification, or I saw your ESG plan and really like that, and that makes me want to consider your firm.
Yeah, I think that's excellent, Mark. And I'm just going to open up the floor to discussion. Why don't you stay up there, because they probably have more questions for you if there are any. So any questions out there? Sounds good. We must have done a good job, Mark.
Yeah, there's a question.
Okay, where are you?
Okay, so your green dots, once your green dots are done.
Hang on, let me pass this over to you. Okay.
Okay, so I don't have to yell. That'd be great. So once your green dots are done, what are you going to replace them with?
Yeah, we literally had that question last month at our board meeting where, like, oh, good, we did these things, we should replace them. You know, the more aggressive of us, we're like, okay, great, check. We should replace that with a new goal. Let's talk about what those goals should be. And then there's also the camp that, like I said, can't we just enjoy the green check mark for a while and, you know, make it look like we've made some progress? And so I don't think we really formalized that, but I don't see us leaving something completed for, you know, more than the next cycle. So when we update it next year, I'm sure that everything that the items that we've accomplished and have the green dots will be replaced with new goals. And I couldn't tell you what those are right now because we haven't started those discussions.
Okay, can I ask some more questions? Yep. So where did these originate from? Did they originate at the director level, or was this more?
Yeah, that's a great
survey from general employees. Yeah. Like, where did they come from?
That's a great question. I think it's very important to make sure you get you know, cut a wide swath through your organization. This isn't just, these goals didn't come from our board. Yeah, they were approved by our board, but they came from, you know, all levels of the company. You know, engineers, commissioning people, young people, older people, different. You know, we tried to be as diverse in that group. And background and experience to you know, pitch the ideas originally, and then of course that gets refined, and there has to be a level of practicality to it because we can't do everything all at once, you know. So you definitely want it to be a cross section of your company, of who you are and who you want to be.
This is my last question. Do you think that those goals, the quantity of goals, will shrink and grow over time? Like right now, you've got a green dot on social, so maybe the social goes from 4 to 3 or from 3 to 7. Do you foresee this being dynamic, or you're saying, no, we need at least 4 in that section?
That's another great question. Again, whatever you think is right is probably the right answer, right? We had people who said, oh, we should have, you know, 4 or 5 goals, and that's it. And then we had a list of, you know, we have 20 things that we'd like to accomplish. And, you know, I'm usually a proponent of, you know, fewer is better, because if you try and focus on everything, you can focus on nothing, right? Some people think 12 is too many. That's where we landed. We're still feeling this out. I definitely see it as being a dynamic thing. I would see that the goals may shrink or go, the number of them, as time goes on, and will certainly change, you know, as we progress. Nothing is set in stone.
Okay, so one more. Have you had any pushback from employees? Have they been like, no, I don't want to participate there?
You know, there's always, you know, a ribbon of some, why don't we have to do this, you know, kind of thing. But overall, it has been very well embraced by our company. You know, it's part of it's really just reflects and documents a lot of things that were part of our culture to begin with, and pushes us a little bit in some areas where we think it's important. But, you know, day to day, it doesn't necessarily impact everybody's job day to day, right? These are goals, things we want to aspire to. You know, once we start putting in the composting in each of the break rooms, you know, we might get some comments about that, some good ones, bad ones, but, you know, it's a process.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Justin, and then this guy back.
So my question was, you developed this plan for TLC. Is this a service now that you're seeing a demand for with other companies? Do you help other companies develop this? a plan? Is this,
No, we're not
It's
trying to get
something
in
internal.
the ESG consulting business.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think it's important that your plan is your plan. We are happy to share, what we've done in our process, and if somebody else, if that inspires somebody or gives them a framework, we would certainly welcome that. If somebody called and asked a question, we would probably be tickled to death to help. Was that it? No more questions?
I got a couple slides here. Just one more slide, which is a wrap up. You can stay up there, Mark. Basically define your corporate value system, or it's going to be defined for you.
Yep.
Write an ESG plan and get business paradigms to evolve. Non-financial operations parameters are becoming more important. Invest in relationships. Engage locally, contribute to community. Governance is talking about executive pay audits and internal controls. Carbon and greenhouse gas reporting by financial and sociology experts. I think there's space in this culture for EMA and for groups like ASHRAE to get involved and start setting fair metrics if we're going to look at big social and governmental projects that affect the whole public. ESG framework for administration, management, and delivery of your service is going to become more and more confusion. A couple more points on the AI side. If you don't see the dangers in AI, then maybe you don't see the dangers in COVID, because without AI, we probably don't sequence the genes that created the virus. And then the other thing I would say is that be nice, and thanks for your time.